This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agner.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined by Jim Keeney. He is the founder and CEO of Dapt Tech. We met at the Pact Capital Conference, which is a fun conference to go to. Jim, how are you, buddy? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I heard you were on a hike this weekend, I think, based off of our little pre-show, which is a very cool thing. You hike every weekend, you said, or you try to?
Pretty close to, yeah. So every weekend it's hiking unless it's biking. So those are my two things.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Where did you grow up? And did that have any impact on you being an entrepreneur later in life?
That's an interesting question. I don't think location had anything to do with it. So I grew up I actually live where I grew up, Crofton, Maryland. Now, I also like to point out that I was born in Brooklyn, New York. So I like to point out that I kept the New York metabolism and added a Southern drawl, which makes a polite New Yorker. So if such a thing exists.
I don't know if that's a real thing, but we'll leave that where it is.
So yeah, no, I think being an entrepreneur is more about kind of energy and metabolism and, focus to details and things of that nature, sensitivity. And I've always been someone who tries to build things. And so entrepreneurship is a manifestation of that. You're listening to what people are struggling with and you're trying to fix problems and build things. I have this story about when I was in kindergarten, believe it or not. I was playing with the blocks and I wanted to build a whole city. They had a tremendous number of blocks. And I vaguely remember organizing the other kids because the other kids wanted to build something else, organizing the other kids to help me build a city.
Very young. Well, one thing you said, metabolism of an entrepreneur. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think entrepreneurs, it's not really bipolar, but there is that notion of just having that extra enthusiasm about life and about things that you kind of jump into things feet first when others might hesitate and think about, and kind of pull themselves back. I've always been, somewhat high strung, mainly around ideas, not, and I think that's part of the entrepreneurial spirit. You're constantly questioning why and what and seeking to do something about it. And that, before starting Dapt Tech, I actually ran a custom software development company called Fitterweb Consulting. And that really was a function of constantly trying to figure out how to build things that other people couldn't. And it really manifests itself in Dapt as well. What we're doing is we're solving job cost accounting, which is being able to do profit and loss by activity. And what we discovered is that it's a complicated situation that people have kind of veered away from, but underneath it, the principles are always the same. And so we solved that complexity, and that's what we do. And what we're doing there is we're helping small companies track what's going on in their business using their normal process that comes through accounting to be able to analyze that profit and loss at the activity level. And it gives them an advantage that other companies don't have.
Yeah, explain that a little bit. When you say like at the activity level, give me just an example. Like who's a company that you would help?
Yeah, so about 50% of our companies are in construction and trades. And the reason why I say trades is HVAC and plumbing and painters and things like that. So the way to think about it is they send out a bunch of people to go do jobs. They track their time against the job. They also indicate other things about what they're doing, like what kind of work they're doing, et cetera, et cetera. We take all that information and we package it and kind of foster it through the payroll processing process. When it comes out the other end, it's dollars. And you want to be able to take those dollars and link them back to the time that was tracked because that defines what the work was that was done. So then you put them together and you can create accounting entries that give you specific insight into how much it cost you to build that wall or, install that toilet, what have you.
Mhm.
And to think about it, it affects the business both directions because now when you know what it actually costs to install a toilet, the next time you estimate a job, you can be more accurate. And on a bigger level, we have companies where they have more than one line of business, and so they're trying to make that decision. Hey, is this line of business a better line to pursue? Should we put all our efforts in there, or should we, spread them out the way we do?
Mhm.
Well, ultimately, that's profitability. So if you have the ability to analyze very quickly and easily, I started with this digital marketing campaign. It came through. The work cost me this much. The revenue was this much. Hey, there's my profit level.
Right.
Let me put more energy into that one because that marketing campaign was very successful to me. Whereas these other two, the profit margins are less because we're arguing with the customers when we're trying to make the sale and the sale takes longer, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
So companies more and more are finding that they're challenged to be doing that not on an annual basis, but on a week to week basis.
Right.
So a good example of that is we have a company that does power generators, the kind you install in houses, and they're in Texas. And as you remember, I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago, they had that cold spell in Texas.
Mhm.
3 years ago, they had that cold spell in Texas. They did more business in 3 months than they typically do in an entire year installing generators, but their overtime costs were significantly higher. So we were able to give them the information to adjust their pricing on a rolling basis to make sure that 3 months worth of work where it was as profitable as an entire year's worth of work. So
Mhm.
then when they went into the rest of the year, they had that cushion and they could take some of that money and invest it back into the business and expand.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So who was your first customer then?
Our first customer was actually a fire suppression company.
Okay.
Uh, and so they go into buildings and they install sprinkler systems and that sort of thing. It was an accountant that worked out on the West Coast. And so she was dealing with all the intricacies of Washington State. And they wanted to do exactly what we do, which was analyze each of their jobs to see which were more profitable and what was a better line of business. And of course, they have two different sides to their business. One is the big commercial, where they serve as a subcontractor
Mhm.
to contractors, and then the other one were the odd jobs that they were picking up. So there was a lot to really think about and understand and compare in order to get to make the right decisions about which line of business to pursue.
And how did you get that customer?
That's a great question. So, because I've given it, you and I talked briefly at the
Sure. Yeah.
conference, given that a lot of thought, especially because the intent of this podcast is to help other entrepreneurs.
Right.
And the reason why I've given it a lot of thought is, you know, entrepreneurs, they don't always fit within the system. And the business world works, there's really two approaches to business, right? The first one is find an institution, a bunch of big corporations or accounting or what have you, align yourself with the behaviors they expect and just ride. But entrepreneurs don't think that way and they don't live that way. They don't, they're like, hey, wait a minute. I'm not going to
Mhm.
join that. I want to be my own free spirit.
Right.
And so for most entrepreneurs, there's two different ways to go after their customers. One is to build their own following of people who will ultimately buy their product. We went the other route, which was the opportunity came to us from someone who worked at Intuit. And Intuit, of course, runs QuickBooks, and QuickBooks, it's now called QuickBooks Time. It used to be T-Sheets. And they came to me when I was head of Fitterweb, and they said, hey, we got this problem. We got all these customers who want custom reporting on their time cards, timesheets. Can you help us? I said, sure, because I happened to be working with their infrastructure as it was. So I built a platform to make it very easy for me to do custom reporting, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it turned out that what they really wanted was to be able to bridge the gap between time collection and payroll processing
Hmm.
so that they could do job costing the way that I described. So that very first customer had both pieces of it, thank goodness. And so once I realized what was going on, I began to figure out both sides of it.
I do wonder. I hear that story quite a bit, and I'm curious how, from a business perspective, you approach that because you had a custom software development shop or a dev shop that you're building products for somebody. Somebody comes to you with a problem and says, "Hey, I need you to solve this problem." You go, "Okay, great. oh wait, this could also serve a bunch of other people that, could use this product. What was the process of productizing this thing and making it resellable? And like, did you have to have a conversation with them? Like, this is going to be a bigger thing, and you guys can be a client of it. Like, how did that work?
Well, I was very fortunate that the person who, her name is Danielle Price, who works at Intuit, who made the first contact with me, she had always kind of seen it as that bigger puzzle.
Hmm.
So I didn't have to go beyond that. And actually, what it facilitated, which is very unusual for a company in our position, is, we're now at 85 customers and growing. For the first 2 years of our existence, we had this almost passive lead funnel.
Right.
Basically, the leads would come from ADP, that would go to Intuit, and then they'd come to us, and we would connect everything for the job costing piece of it.
Hmm.
So what the reason why I say that was very fortunate is there was a tremendous amount of complexity behind the scenes. And so because we were not having to focus on getting the next customer, we could focus on what the customers were telling us
Hmm.
and what their problems were, and how to build out the infrastructure to be able to be powerful and flexible enough to do what we were doing on an industrial scale. And so now we're at the point where we can ramp up the marketing, we can ramp up the sales because we've got that reproducible thing. And again, it was because for 2 years, we didn't have to go out in search of our customers, and we didn't have to kind of expand beyond that. Now, I will say that right from the beginning, we understood it was a big problem. You could tell by the way that people were talking about it. On top of that, it fits one of the things that I've seen as a great pattern, which is find a problem that's really not sexy, that nobody loves, but has a whole bunch of people whose livelihood is dependent upon it,
Yep.
and go after that, because everybody has a new idea about the things that are, kind of exciting and rich and all that kind of stuff. And so there, it's all about, can you raise enough capital to out compete and out
Right.
muscle the other guys? Here, it's really about solving the problem. And again, as I said, I'm always about building things. It's really about, can you solve the problem? And I've had accountants who have been in the business forever who said, hey, I've been at this for 25 years and nobody else has solved it.
Hmm.
And you have. Now, I personally think, because I look at everything from the development standpoint and software and everything, I think it's straightforward.
Right.
But
Right.
that's my little craziness, right?
No, I look, I mean, I run a QA agency, so I don't think there's anything probably less sexy in software development than QA. So I hear you about, but it's you can't make quality software without it. So it's like you
Yeah.
do need it. And if there, and I hear the same thing a lot of time from our customers, like that's all you guys do is QA, like that's it. I'm like, that's it, but we just do it really well. So it's an interesting kind of comment there, that going after the unsexy thing. I like that. And so you talked about ramping up marketing and sales, kind of be in the position where you were fortunate enough to have this lead funnel that was kind of just trickling in. And I love the partnership kind of angle there, where you just were kind of part of this ecosystem and just getting these leads filtered in. That's been a great, I've heard that a lot. So how are you putting together your marketing and sales strategy? If you're a tech guy, you built this platform, you got these partnerships that are going on already, like you kind of had to start at square one of building this strategy to get an inbound or an outbound, whatever you're going to do, sales funnel for marketing and sales. So what has been your approach to do that?
Yeah. So we, in a prior life, I actually focused a lot on this. So I worked for 2 years at a digital agency called Navigation Arts in Washington D.C., and then later on, when I was working Fitterweb, I helped customers with some of this. And then for about 4 years, I ran the Baltimore social media meetup, way back before social media was the thing it is today. So, I, you know, we fall in the we're very much a function of influencer marketing, because the industry is, so we're influencing the accounting industry, the back office.
Hmm.
And they're very much about, you know, helping each other. It's a very tight community. And so for us, it's all about building authority in the subject matter, and then using that as our outreach to expand our brand. We're also very fortunate because, again, we have a partnership with Intuit. We are now qualified for the ADP marketplace, so we have a relationship with ADP. We're in the process of building a relationship with Paychex and several other payroll processing companies. So our marketing is, hey, use us. And what's great about what we do is we close sales. So what happens is, an ADP rep goes in and they get everybody excited about, HRIS and payroll processing and all that kind of stuff. Then they start talking to the back office accounting staff, and the accounting staff says, well, do you do, certified payroll, and do you do, shift differential? And, they've got a list of must haves. At that point, I've now got them to the point where they call us because we have all those answers.
Hmm.
So it's really about building that authority and building that reputation.
Hmm.
And that is going to be traditional content marketing, but with the email channel and LinkedIn being the heavy focus of that.
If you didn't have that Intuit and ADP partnership, which is fantastic, by the way, I think those are going to serve you really well. How would you recommend somebody establish a partnership with, a well-known company if they're just some, small business and they don't have an in, maybe like you had? How would
Right.
you, tell them or at least give them advice to maybe try to establish that partnership?
Yeah. So start with the problem. Don't lose track of that. Right. So the problem has people who need to solve it. So you go find them, find what communities they circulate in, and work your way through the ranks of those communities. They're going to refer you to the source.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of time. They're going to say, hey, you got to meet this person.
Now, when you say
So,
communities, what do you mean specifically? Are you talking, Reddit groups? Are you talking about business chambers? Are you talking about when you say communities, what do you mean?
yeah, it's digital communities.
Okay.
We're big in accounting. So it's for us, obviously QuickBooks has a big convention. That's one place, but it's just finding thought leaders within the accounting community,
Mm-hmm.
making the relationship with those thought leaders, and then partnering with them to expand your authority. And again, so I started. Danielle Price has been very good and supportive of us. She introduced us to the ADP
Mm-hmm.
uh, groups. We worked our way up through the ADP channels, through Intuit. We've now got a relationship with a company called Out of the Box. They're one of the largest aftermarket service providers for QuickBooks. Through our customers, we got introduced to Paychex. That's how we're working on building our integration with Paychex as well, et cetera, et cetera. So it's expanding outward.
Mm-hmm.
But the key thing here is, you know, when I started out, nobody was talking about job costing the way I'm talking about job costing. Nobody thought about it the way I'm thinking about it. So I would get on sales calls with ADP reps, and I'd go through my little pattern where I say, job cost accounting is dependent upon three pillars. The first one is accounting, the second one is time tracking, the third one is payroll processing. In accounting, you set up your jobs, that information synchronizes with time tracking, your employees track their time against the job. That information then goes into payroll where you pay the individual, hours become dollars, the dollars need to be connected back to time tracking. Boom. That's how you get your accounting entries going back into job costing.
Hmm.
So I came up with that pattern on my own just by listening to what people were saying and interpreting what it meant. And then when you start echoing that back to people who have been in the know and in the community, they go, wow, that's much clearer. That's much more straightforward. They want to be with you.
Right.
And that gives you the leverage to the next connection, to the next connection, to the next connection.
Hmm.
So the underlying instinct of the entrepreneur is what drove that.
Right.
Is understand the problem, understand the patterns of the problem, solve the problem, reflect that back to the world at large. It becomes, a self-reinforcing echo chamber that allows you to build and build.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes I think you got to twist the question,
Right.
ask the entrepreneur if they're struggling with that. Well, who's listening to you?
Mm-hmm.
And what are you saying that that they are telling you concretely is what they want to hear?
Right. Right.
It's a bit of an echo and response.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. And I think in a lot of ways, establishing partnerships is a different flavor of sales and marketing, right? I mean, you are selling your partnership to the, and I remember sitting at a lunch one time with this partnership guy, and I wasn't getting any traction. I could just tell it just wasn't a great, like, just one of those call, you're just at lunch and you're talking and it's just, it wasn't hitting. I couldn't figure out why. And I left that meeting and I was thinking, what the hell, what happened there? And it was because I had the epiphany that, oh, I wasn't providing enough value to him. Like, he didn't give a shit that I was trying to pitch my, whatever I was saying about how great of a, QA partner we could be for them, a services partner. I wasn't showing him that I was going to solve his problem, which for a lot of those service part, in our industry, it's, companies want to make a product. They want to make a QA product. They don't want to support it. They don't want to be the implementation partner or the, whatever. So we would solve that for a bunch of different companies, but we weren't doing that for them. So it's a great point about kind of working your way up and building that partnership in a way that's beneficial for both sides and solving the problem first, and then having that answer when you go to them and say, this is what we're going to give you as a partner, right? Because that's all anybody cares about at the end of the day is, what are you going to do for me, right? Even a partnership. So very cool stuff. All right, I have one more question for you,
For sure.
non-business related. If you could do anything in the world and you knew you wouldn't fail, what would it be?
So this is like an avocation of mine. So if you think about blockchain and you think about what it enables, trustless transaction tracking. If you think about building an economy based on that, there's a tremendous amount of stuff that people do on a regular basis that they don't get credit for. And the further down into the economic strata you go, so the least supported groups in society, the more their activities are not tracked or not trackable, not traceable. Okay. So if we could enable a blockchain platform that made it very easy for people to constantly track all the, I lent so and so my lawnmower for 2 hours and get credit for that.
Right.
Okay. All right. So that prevents your foundation. You didn't expect a long answer like this, but
Well, I didn't expect it to include job costing, but I'm going to let you continue.
no, it's not really. So then the difference between the economies of the world that are doing really well and the rest of the economy is the ability to have a security aftermarket.
Mm-hmm.
And traditionally, securities have always been against hard assets like houses and things like that. So the difference between the United States and other countries, if you trace it all the way back, has to do with the fact that we made it very easy to securitize a house. And we made it very easy to securitize a piece of land or a business or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So you get bonds. That's a leverage effect. And that leverage effect is a multiplier. So the value of everything that you have is much greater when it's securitized, which then gives the United States a huge advantage over other countries that trail behind in securitization,
Mm-hmm.
because we have more liquid capital in order to reinvest and therefore create greater innovation. Well,
Mm-hmm.
we talk about the fact that classes that, there are people within the United States who don't have access to that ecosystem. It's because they don't have anything that's securitizable. However, the latest technology in fintech is beginning to realize that you can securitize streams of payments,
Mm-hmm.
not the thing itself. Well, if you take that one step further and you're able to securitize actual transactions that don't involve monetary exchanges.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I babysat for you. I let you. Now your economy is magnified tenfold.
Hmm.
And suddenly money is flowing both directions. Okay, so the reason why all of that's important is because capitalism has a counterflow problem. There are many ways in which money can be aggregated. There are very few ways for it to be dispersed. The government, stock market, etc. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had a foundational kind of blockchain infrastructure that was tracking all economic activity, it could also be an investment vehicle that would be far more equitable and far more de-risked than every other market out there. And suddenly now you have a way for aggregated capital to be invested all the way through the economy rather than to a certain level and not beyond.
I
Uh,
thought you were gonna say hike every trail in the world, but instead you hit me with foundational blockchain uh, economic, change in the world. So you're right. I was not expecting that. I think it's a very cool answer. I'm sure it's, it went, part of it went over my head, but I think I got the concept of it. But no, dude, Jim, you're fantastic, man. If you want to find out more about you or about Dapt, how do they do that?
my email is jim.keeney@dapt.tech, and that's dapt.tech, Tech. And our website is dapt.tech, again, Tech. Feel free to look us up. Feel free to email me directly. I'm always interested in talking to people about Dapt and about job cost accounting of all the interesting things in the world.
Beautiful. I love it. I'm sure there will be people who take you up on that. Jim, you're fantastic, brother. Best of luck with you. Have a happy holiday season, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right.
Jay, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it very much and look forward to talking to you later.
Absolutely. Thanks,
All
Jim.
right.
See you, man.
All right. Happy holidays.